Lily Harrington spent 10 years locked in a basement, and her own mother, Rebecca Harrington, was the one who held the key. In a quiet suburban neighborhood, the Harringtons lived in a house that looked ordinary from the outside, with its white picket fence, neatly trimmed lawn, and flower beds that changed with the seasons. On the surface, Rebecca Harrington seemed like any other devoted mother. She wore her neat sweaters and sensible shoes, always with a polite smile, and neighbors often saw her tending to her garden or walking her dog along the sidewalk. To them, she was careful, considerate, and diligent, the kind of person you could imagine volunteering at school events or organizing bake sales. But behind the perfectly painted walls and the warm-looking curtains, a darkness simmered that no one could have anticipated. Her daughter, Lily, was rarely seen in public. Sometimes, neighbors caught glimpses of a small, pale girl standing at the window, watching the world outside with wide, anxious eyes. She never played in the yard or laughed with other children. If anyone asked about her, Rebecca had a story ready. Lily was shy, delicate, or ill, sometimes enrolled in special programs or sent to boarding schools. Everyone accepted her explanations. No one questioned the unusual quiet that lingered in the house. The first signs of trouble emerged slowly, almost imperceptibly, like cracks forming beneath a smooth surface. Teachers at Lily's school noticed her absence from classes, and attempts to contact the Harringtons went unanswered. Letters were returned unopened, phone calls unanswered, emails ignored. At first, staff assumed it was a temporary issue, perhaps illness, perhaps family travel, but days turned into weeks, and the worry became persistent. Finally, a concerned teacher decided to call the local police. What began as a routine welfare check would soon unravel a nightmare that had remained hidden for 10 long years. Detective Sarah Collins was assigned to the case. She had been a police officer for over a decade, and she had seen her share of unsettling situations, but nothing quite like this. When she arrived at the Harrington residence, she took in every detail with a trained eye. The clean sidewalks, the flower pots arranged meticulously on the porch, the curtains drawn in perfect symmetry. Everything seemed normal, almost too normal. She exchanged a look with her partner, Detective Marcus Lane, and whispered, "Something's off here. It doesn't feel right." They knocked on the front door, their boots echoing softly on the polished floor. Silence met them. They tried again, firmer this time, but still nothing. A faint sound finally reached them, almost imperceptible at first, a low, trembling whimper. It seemed to come from deep within the house, behind a door at the end of the hallway. Following the sound, they discovered a heavy, locked basement door. Rebecca Harrington had always been careful, but her carefulness had become a cage. As the officers forced the door open, a musty smell hit their nostrils. The dim light revealed a narrow room, barely large enough to stand in. And there she was, Lily, thin and fragile, her eyes wide with fear and disbelief. She had spent years confined in this tiny space, surrounded by darkness, yet her gaze was filled with a mixture of terror and longing for freedom. Detective Collins' stomach churned as she realized the enormity of what lay before her. This was no ordinary case. This was a decade-long nightmare concealed behind the mask of suburban perfection. Outside, the neighborhood remained oblivious, unaware that such horror had been hidden in plain sight, quietly, silently, for 10 long years. Police cautiously stepped into the dim basement, their flashlights cutting through the shadows, revealing the horrifying reality that had been hidden for a decade. The air was thick and damp, carrying the faint smell of mold and neglect. Every corner of the small, cramped room seemed to close in, the walls lined with crude wooden boards and the floor bare concrete. In one corner, shackles were still attached to a metal ring in the wall. The faint whimpering grew louder as they approached, and then they saw her Lily. She was emaciated, her clothes tattered and stained, her hair matted from years without proper care. Her eyes were wide with disbelief, darting nervously at the strange figures in uniforms. She had not only been physically confined, but psychologically imprisoned, conditioned to fear the outside world and the very people trying to save her. Detective Sarah Collins moved carefully, her voice calm but firm. "We're here to help you. You're safe now." Lily flinched at the sound, her small frame trembling uncontrollably. A medical team quickly moved in, assessing her condition. Dr. Alan Pierce, the on-site medical examiner, knelt beside her, speaking softly. "She's alive, barely. We need to get her out of here immediately." Lily's body was frail, her ribs visible beneath thin skin, and it was clear she had been deprived of proper nutrition for years. There were cuts and bruises on her wrists and ankles, marks left from the chains and the harsh confinement that had defined her entire adolescence. Upstairs, Rebecca Harrington sat calmly in the living room as the police arrived. She did not appear distressed or frightened. Instead, she wore a composed expression, almost as if she were proud of what she had done. When Detective Collins confronted her, she offered no apology or explanation that could justify her actions. "She never had to go through the cruel world outside," Rebecca said, her tone even, almost rehearsed. Collins felt a chill run down her spine. This was not care or protection. It was control and domination disguised as maternal concern. Officers began documenting the basement meticulously, photographing every detail and collecting evidence. There were journals, scattered papers with scribbled messages and drawings, some depicting fantastical escape scenarios, others dark and ominous sketches revealing the depth of Lily's fear and imagination. It was as if the young girl had created an alternate reality in her mind to cope with the decade of imprisonment. Each discovery painted a clearer picture of the mental and emotional torment she had endured. Neighbors who had always viewed the Harrington home as ordinary were contacted for statements. They described Rebecca as polite, careful, and conscientious, often seen tending her garden or walking the dog. No one had suspected the basement, no one had questioned the strange absence of Lily in public. Officers realized just how meticulously Rebecca had crafted this illusion of normalcy, hiding the horrific truth in plain sight. As paramedics carefully transported Lily to the hospital, she clung to a blanket, shivering and silent, yet her eyes reflected the faintest spark of hope. Detective Collins knew the road ahead would be long and painful, not just for Lily's physical recovery, but for her emotional healing. The world she had been denied for 10 years now waited for her, vast and overwhelming, and yet for the first time in a decade, she was free. But as the investigation moved forward, it became painfully clear that the nightmare was far from over, and that the story behind the Harrington house held even darker secrets yet to be uncovered. The investigation into Lily Harrington's decade-long confinement quickly became a complex web of deception, manipulation, and cruelty. Police worked tirelessly to piece together the fragments of a life stolen from a child, uncovering shocking details about Rebecca Harrington's carefully orchestrated control. Every aspect of Lily's existence had been monitored and manipulated. School records had been falsified or destroyed, medical appointments were non-existent, and neighbors had been fed elaborate stories about boarding schools, illnesses, or extended family trips to explain her absence. It became clear that Rebecca had devoted 10 years to maintaining the illusion of normalcy, creating a world that existed only within the walls of her house. Detective Sarah Collins and her partner, Marcus Lane, began interrogating Rebecca. Her calm demeanor was unnerving. She claimed she had acted out of love, insisting that the outside world was cruel and dangerous, and that her daughter had been safer confined at home. But as officers cross-checked her statements with evidence, her stories began to unravel. Receipts, online orders, and delivery records revealed extensive purchases of locks, chains, and cameras, all items used to maintain the basement prison. Emails to anonymous addresses suggested she had consulted others on methods of confinement and isolation. It became painfully clear that Rebecca had not acted impulsively. This was a carefully planned, premeditated operation. Forensic experts combed through the house, finding every corner a testament to years of preparation. Hidden cameras, recording devices, and reinforced locks were scattered throughout the basement. Officers found notebooks filled with rules, schedules, and lists of punishments, revealing a rigid and oppressive system imposed on Lily. She planned every detail, every restriction, one investigator noted grimly. This wasn't just confinement, it was psychological warfare. Interviews with friends, relatives, and neighbors painted a picture of Rebecca as controlling, obsessive, and socially manipulative. She had presented herself as the perfect mother to the outside world, while systematically erasing Lily's autonomy and identity. Detectives also uncovered financial records that revealed a deeper obsession. Rebecca had funneled significant amounts of money into creating a self-contained prison, hiring someone to install reinforced doors and surveillance systems, and even purchasing specialized items to monitor Lily's behavior. The evidence suggested that the confinement was intended to continue indefinitely. Every detail, from food rationing to psychological conditioning, had been meticulously planned. As the investigation unfolded, officers discovered that Rebecca had convinced herself that her actions were justified, framing her control as protection. But the reality was far more sinister. Police realized that Lily had been deprived not only of freedom, but of human connection, education, and the chance to develop normally. Her entire childhood and adolescence had been stolen. Detective Collins reflected on the psychological scars that would take years to heal, knowing that the evidence would only tell part of the story. The true horror lay in the emotional and mental abuse that had gone on unseen for 10 years. The case drew national attention, and the media coverage added pressure to ensure justice. Neighbors who had once admired Rebecca expressed shock and disbelief, some in tears, others struggling to reconcile the polite, friendly woman they knew with the calculated captor who had lived among them. As the investigation deepened, Collins and her team realized this was no ordinary case of parental neglect. It was a story of manipulation, cruelty, and obsession that would leave an indelible mark on everyone involved. And the layers of deception hinted at even more disturbing secrets yet to be uncovered. Lily's first days outside the Harrington house were a mix of relief, confusion, and terror. The sunlight felt overwhelming, and the sounds of the neighborhood, children laughing, cars passing, birds chirping, were both new and frightening. Doctors and therapists worked tirelessly to assess her physical and mental state. She was malnourished, weak, and covered with scars and bruises, both old and recent. Yet the most severe damage was invisible, the psychological toll of 10 years in isolation. Lily had been denied social interaction, basic education, and the ability to make any decisions for herself. Everything she knew about life had been filtered through her mother's controlling lens, leaving her with deep anxiety, mistrust, and confusion about the world outside. Detective Sarah Collins visited the hospital frequently, not just to gather statements, but to offer reassurance. "You're safe now," she told Lily gently, sitting beside her hospital bed. At first, Lily barely spoke, her voice a fragile whisper. Over time, she began to recount fragments of her life in captivity, the hours spent in near darkness, the punishments for the smallest perceived missteps, the constant monitoring by cameras, and the strict rules her mother imposed. Every detail revealed the depth of control Rebecca had exercised, and Collins realized that understanding the full extent of the abuse would be essential for both the investigation and Lily's recovery. Therapists observed that Lily exhibited classic signs of trauma, severe trust issues, hyper-vigilance, panic attacks, and difficulty forming coherent sentences under stress. She had to relearn everyday tasks that most people take for granted, from walking freely without fear to interacting with strangers without panic. Each day was a battle to reclaim her independence. While medical treatment restored her physical health, therapy became the slow process of rebuilding her shattered sense of self. The media quickly picked up the story, and public outrage was intense. Social media posts, news articles, and television segments painted a chilling picture of the Harrington household. Many viewers were horrified not only by the decade of confinement, but by how meticulously Rebecca had concealed the abuse. Interviews with neighbors revealed regret and guilt, as many admitted that they had suspected something odd about Lily's absence but never questioned Rebecca directly. The revelation that a child had been imprisoned for 10 years in a seemingly normal suburban home shocked the nation. As Lily's mental and emotional state slowly stabilized, police continued their investigation into Rebecca's methods and motives. They interviewed relatives, neighbors, and anyone who might have had contact with her over the years. Each interview revealed the lengths Rebecca had gone to maintain control, from manipulating neighbors to create false explanations for Lily's absence to purchasing equipment to monitor and restrict her daughter's movements. Detectives documented every detail meticulously, knowing that the courtroom would demand proof of years of calculated abuse. Amidst all this, Lily began to show signs of resilience. Small victories, walking outside without fear, speaking to a stranger, or simply laughing, became milestones. Detective Collins watched closely, aware that while the legal case would bring justice, the real journey would be Lily's lifelong struggle to recover from the horrors she had endured. The emotional toll was immense, but there was also a sense of hope, fragile but real, that Lily could one day reclaim the life that had been stolen from her. The story of the Harringtons, horrifying as it was, had only just begun to unfold in the public eye, and the investigation continued to reveal layers of deception, control, and obsession that had remained hidden for far too long. As the trial approached, what had already shocked the nation took an even darker turn. Police investigators, revisiting the evidence and interviewing previously overlooked witnesses, discovered that Rebecca Harrington had not acted alone. Her own sister, Diane, lived just a few blocks away and had been quietly complicit in the confinement. Diane had provided supplies, kept watch, and lied to anyone who asked about Lily's absence. She had even helped Rebecca reinforce the basement and monitor cameras. The betrayal stunned everyone involved. It was one thing to imprison a child, but to find a family member actively aiding in the crime added an unimaginable layer of cruelty. Further investigation brought to light a shocking truth that left prosecutors and psychologists alike speechless. DNA testing revealed that Lily was not Rebecca's biological daughter. The child had been abducted from a distant town when she was a toddler, a fact Rebecca had concealed for years. Every explanation she had given neighbors, teachers, and authorities was a fabrication designed to cover her premeditated crime. This revelation reframed the entire case. Lily had not only been held prisoner for 10 years, but she had been stolen from her real family, whose agony and confusion had remained unresolved all this time. In the courtroom, the evidence was presented methodically. Prosecutors displayed photos of the basement, the journals, the chains, and surveillance equipment. They detailed how Rebecca and her sister had meticulously maintained Lily's confinement, manipulating her environment and limiting all human contact. Experts testified about the psychological damage inflicted over a decade, severe anxiety, post-traumatic stress, and the long-term effects of isolation and control. The narrative shocked everyone, even seasoned court reporters who had covered countless crimes. The public listened in stunned silence as the timeline of abuse, deceit, and manipulation unfolded, each revelation more disturbing than the last. Rebecca Harrington's demeanor remained eerily calm throughout the proceedings. She insisted she had acted out of love, attempting to justify her actions as protection, yet the evidence was overwhelming. Testimonies from psychologists, former neighbors, and family members painted a portrait of calculated cruelty. Diane, her sister, was also forced to confront her involvement, tearfully acknowledging her role in the crime. The courtroom became a stage where the full depth of betrayal, obsession, and control was laid bare, leaving no room for doubt about the severity of their actions. When the verdict was finally delivered, the courtroom erupted. Rebecca Harrington was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, and her sister received a decades-long sentence for her complicity. The legal resolution provided some measure of justice, but it could not undo the years Lily had lost. Outside the courthouse, the young woman stood silently, absorbing the reality that she was finally free, and that the people who had stolen her childhood were permanently removed from her life. In the aftermath, Lily began her slow and painful journey of recovery. Therapy, support from new guardians, and the eventual reunion with her biological family offered glimpses of hope. Detective Collins reflected on the case, haunted by the calculated cruelty and meticulous planning of Rebecca Harrington. The story served as a chilling reminder that evil can hide behind the most familiar faces, and that sometimes the most terrifying monsters are those who wear the face of a mother. Even as justice was served, the echoes of the past lingered, shaping Lily's future as she reclaimed the life that had been stolen from her.